So now I would like to pass the microphone to Mr. Ibrahim Al-Zayyat, who will moderate the session of economics and finance. He's joined with outstanding scholars. I will leave to him to introduce them. Thank you.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
In the name of God, the merciful and the compassionate, peace be upon you all.
Of the last session has started also to speak in Flemish, but you all know, especially you in Belgium, that you have a Flemish and a French and a third deutschsprachige Gemeinschaft. Deshalb möchte ich Sie alle herzlich auch in Deutsch begrüßen, da Sie in Belgien sind. By the way, for those who do not know, this German-speaking community has about 80,000 people, and they have their own parliament, so they are quite relevant to the country. At the very same time, I am happy to be here, and on behalf of CILE and the European Muslim Network, that is a think tank based in Brussels, and that I am proud to be a member of. I am here to chair this important session. As we also have heard from the first panel that was in front of us, we have some issues with science. And when we speak about economics and science, the issues are even bigger, because some people are of deep conviction that economics is not connected to science at all. Whereas some others look into it as social physics, and we have mathematical models that are used. And the big problem that we see is in mathematics, we have a clear description by experiments. But in economics, it is merely observations. Or maybe we are now in one of the very huge experiments that we are all part of when we look into Europe and how they deal with the economic challenges that are facing today. I am really happy to introduce to you our panel that is, as it has been said, of profound people that are long-standing in this areas, and I am very happy to introduce, starting from left to right, Professor Dr. Abdullah Al Judai, who came to us from the UK, and I'm going to introduce him at a later stage more in detail. Brother Abdelazeem Abozaid next to me, and also, we have a change in the program due to the fact that Professor Kamal Khattab was not able to join. So we have Dr. Mohammed Seddik from France, from Paris, as a substitute. And we thank him very much for taking the challenge to prepare and to present his thought on that. Looking into the program that is in front of us, we will try to have 3 times 15-minute presentations. The first one will be from Dr. Mohammed Seddik, giving an overview with regard to theory of akhlaq, that means of ethics and Islamic economics. So we have this connection that will be an overview in the beginning, then we go more into detail with Professor Abdullah Al Judai, and we'll put some emphasis on the issue of riba afterwards, also with Dr. Abdelazeem Abozaid. Afterwards, we will open up then into discussion, and we are very happy to have you, Professor Vines, with us also to join. Dr. Mohammed Seddik is born and brought up in Halab, in Aleppo, in Syria. He has a master in languages and culture and a PhD in Islamic economics from Paris University. He has been also involved with the International Institute of Islamic Thought in Paris and is today president of the International Organization for Relief and Development. I pass over the mic to him, please.
Merci. Assalamu alaikum. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Sayyidina Rasulillah.
In the name of God, the merciful, and peace be upon his prophet, I will take the floor in Arabic. My intervention with regard to the theory of ethics and economics. Let us agree at the beginning. I cannot in this very short time to speak in length, and we cannot speak specifically about the ethical dimension from Islam perspective, who can be the basis. What I would like to say through this short intervention is basically to touch upon some issues that are problematic for the in the Islamic economics with regard to the link with ethics and understanding of ethics. There is a problem of concepts of understanding that we are going through with regard to Islamic economy. And one of the reasons for these problems is that ethics are no longer given enough importance and are understood but on a very shallow basis and very literal understanding without getting or delving into the values, the rulings, and the normative standards. And in this respect, with the Islamic lexis, economically speaking, well, we have two, the communist and the capitalist systems, which are different. This is what the Islamic world face. These two economic systems are different, indeed, with regard to their values regarding the Islamic world. And there has been an attempt, they attempted, then they tried to give a new dimension, to avoid the contradiction between these two systems and Islamic economy. So they tried to create, to set up what they call Islamic institutions, to reconcile these various systems. Now, they faced a problem, a dilemma, because they did accept the Western concepts from the Western institutions. As an example, they accepted the structure of the capitalist structure that have been adopted, such as banks, for example, bank systems, insurance funds, and they tried to Islamize it, if you like, to put it in the Islamic framework and box. Now, the idea is the problem that Islamists or Islamic economists didn't solve is that the fact that the institutions, the European institutions, and the example that have been given to the Islamic world is something unavoidable, and they have to accept it as such and try to integrate some Islamic values. And that was the problem. Now, with regard to the Islamic economy, we notice that Islamist economists always try to boost the Islamic economy by decrying the Western model. So it is always in opposition. They say that in Islam there is equality, and there is fairness, and all the nice values and private freedoms, all the positive have been claimed as being in the Islamic systems. And they say that Islamic economy has gone beyond the problems that have been shown in the Western systems, and they claim they have come with remedies to that. But practically, in practice, we notice that this comparison between Islamic economy and communists, well, it led nowhere, because we see that the communist system have collapsed, but whereas the capitalist system has evolved so much that any comparison between capitalist system and Islamic systems was unjustified and couldn't be and it didn't bear water anymore. And up until today, we still see that Islamist economists do criticize Adam Smith theory, whereas we see that the capitalist system has evolved so much, and this comparison and the way Islamist economists have dealt with the concepts of Western concepts is not proper. And I would like to explain why this approach was not beneficial and led to mistakes and misconceptions. Now, according to me, why did we make this problem? Why did we reach this dilemma? The problem is that the Islamic economists today have used these analytical tools from new concepts such as consumption, investments, and they have tried to involve and integrate new concepts of equality and fairness and Islamic investments. But they forgot that these methodologies are not neutral in themselves. They are based specifically on economic rationality. This concept, well, Islamic economists have criticized this in all their writings, in all their research, and this concept, they said that this concept is completely different from the capitalist perceptions, and they didn't take all the concepts and they didn't study them in enough details. So, for example, if we look at some books from Dr. Asami and Dr. Afar, we see that they have extremely important books about this concept. Now, with the development of capitalist economy, there is a new school of thought in 1998, which is called the economy of conventions from France, which we call the economy of convention from Olivier Favreau. Among the French economists, they say that the capitalist analysis economically is wrong, and because it didn't take into account the ethics, the ethical dimension, the ethical dimension. So what is right and what is wrong, what is moral and immoral. These have not been taken into account in the capitalist system of economic thinking. And they found out that there was this need of overhauling this thought, and Islamic economy meets the same challenges and the same problems. And therefore, it was proved that prices are not the only criteria of the fairness of the economic and commercial transactions. There are other criteria that have to be taken into account, and we needed rules, values, and in order to find out what is licit and what is illicit, what is forbidden and what is acceptable. This school of thought, which is not analyzed the Islamic economics, they found, referring to the French school of thought, they found out that we needed desperately to integrate values and ethics in the equation, and especially with regard to the behavioral, the attitudes of financiers in this respect. This has been published in 1989 in France and has become now an important reference in researchers in the world. It is an economic magazine which contains articles of philosophy, economy, among other things. This school of thought, after it has integrated ethical values in the economy, they spoke about the revolution in the economic views. It's a neoclassic approach, and the aim of which is to change the values and the setup. In the past, we used to study goods and services. This school of thought says this is wrong. That shouldn't be what should be dealt with. We should talk about the contract between the lender and the debtor, the transactions and the contracts. And this is exactly what Islamic thinkers say. There need to be a balance based on the contract, on a fair contract. So we need to take ethical dimension based on price, but which should be fair for both parties. The other issue, well, in the past, we should to speak about the balance between demand and supply. And now we're looking for the best possible strategy that would be fair for both parties. Many theories that have been proven in the past have been denied so far. They have been proven wrong. And this new school of thought in France is still being understood, being widespread and analyzed. It is developed in France specifically, but also in other universities worldwide that are giving more importance to this school of thought from France. And this is precisely why, if Dr. Tariq, I would like to ask the Center of Islamic Legislation and Ethics should be at the forefront in providing research and analysis of Islamic economy. And in this respect, I think that the approach that we needs to be adopted by the Center of Islamic Legislation and Ethics, if they want to go forward in this respect, that they should look at the economic setup, structure of capitalism in order to analyze them and look into the major components of them in order to have an inspiration and from them in order to develop the Islamic system and to create that complementarity. Now, we always look at the Islamic, at the Western the Western system as being the source for our systems, and we should look back at our heritage because in our heritage, maybe they should, if we look at our heritage, we may find inspiration in order to establish new systems, completely new systems. Now, if we look at, for example, the short-term consuming credits, for example, this should be looked at. And also, we should also look at the Islamic economics and to analyze it at the micro and macro level as well, in light of the new knowledge, new information that is available to us from the economy of institutions. Three, Islamic economists should give a very big importance to studying the systems available today in order to look at the nature of them and to feed into the Islamic perspectives in order to make it evolve according to today's standards, and especially with regard to the zakat, for example, and the Islamic endowment. Now, our system differ in various concepts, especially with regard to the zakat, for example, and the al-awqaf, which is the endowment. And I really hope that this new school of thought, the economy of conventions from France, I hope that this is going to be given enough importance by the Center of Islamic Legislation and Ethics in the future. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mohammed Seddik, for your introduction, and I think it highlighted the challenges that we see into a discipline that is quite newly founded. When we look back into Islamic economics as a discipline, then it is less than 40, 50 years of presence, and there is no doubt that the challenges around it are quite various. And I'm happy to introduce to you now Professor Abdullah Al Judai. Dr. Abdullah Al Judai received his PhD in Islamic economics and is one of the leading Islamic scholars in Islamic economics today in the world. He is of Iraqi background, born in Basra, and received ijazas from a number of leading scholars in Iraq. He is a founding member of the European Council for Fatwa and Research that is headed by Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi, and has served as its first Secretary General between 1998 and 2000. He has been in different roles as Imam and Khatib of a number of mosques in the Muslim world as well as in Europe. Sheikh Abdullah has been also huge in publishing. So he has more than 100 books on a wide range of topics and issues. And it's not only Islamic economics. If you want to read something very special in gender, then you will also find him to have a lot of very, very interesting ideas. But today, coming back to where we just started, Islamic economics is plainly defined around the concept of riba. And the question, what is exactly interest, what is forbidden interest? And so I am very happy to have him here and to introduce riba concept and consequences. And despite of the fact that he's very, very close to my heart, I'm not able to give him more than 15 minutes as well.
جزاك الله خير. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ولي
Peace be upon Allah, and I would like to thank you all for the possibility of being here. And I testify there is no God except Allah, the Almighty, and I testify that Muhammad is the Prophet and Messenger of Allah. Dear colleagues, brothers and sisters, I'm not going to talk about philosophical issues and or ethics for that matter. I would now look at something specific with regard to the legal Sharia rulings, going back to the scripture, and I would like to talk to one major question in this respect, and this is what you have heard from my colleague Ibrahim. What is the concept of the decisively forbidden riba in Islam? And I think that there is a major difference between Islamic banking, for example, although I always express my reservation with regard to what is Islamic banking, but still we need to look at the concepts and the rationale behind it, and we need to look at the difference between the traditional banking and Islamic banking as well. I will talk about the commercial system. I don't like to talk about usury-based finance. And clearly, this is what people know. This is how Muslims know riba. Quran, when it has been revealed, and when Allah prohibited riba, well, the companions of the Prophet, be upon him, they didn't ask questions about riba. He gave them information about the concept of riba that has been relieved. They didn't ask him because riba was present then at that time. That was widespread at that time. And this is what Quran says. We need to look at the environment of the revelation. Our Prophet, Allah says that the Prophet in the sermon of farewell said that commerce, trade is licit and riba is illicit. And the companion, like the companions of the Prophet, have understood the riba then because the circumstances were clear. And in this respect, the pre-Islamic riba that was rampant at that time is riba which is decisively proven prohibited, and which is the increase of the interest of the amount of money when that money is due back, and not at the beginning of the contract. At that time, that wasn't known as such, and this is what the variety of exegetes and jurists say. There is no riba in credit then at that time in pre-Islamic era. And lately, these concepts have changed. And Arabs at that time, even in pre-Islamic era, didn't witness credit with interest, because at that time credit was something merciful, was something that was used to help other people. So there was no such thing as interest when you have to refund a credit, and the Prophet at that time promoted the credit because it was an act of good deed to help the poor people. So riba, if we look at it as a credit, for example, I say if I give you 100 euros and you give me back 120, this is riba. This is riba. This is a usury-based credit because there is a difference between the two parts. So in other words, I help you with 1 dime, provided you give me back 2 dimes. So what is important in this respect is let us make it clear what type of riba that has been decisively forbidden in pre-Islamic time, which is when the time of repayment, the creditor would say to the debtor, either you pay me back fully or I impose an interest on the amount of money that is with a deferred time frame, when the debtor then is no longer able to pay back. And if we look at this concept of riba at the beginning of the contract, when a person asks money from another person, and the situation in pre-Islamic era, and that was precisely what was forbidden decisively at that time. So we have the usury based credits, and Al-Jassas and Al-Hanafi, these are thinkers and jurists who have given examples and have explained the difference of riba and interests, and on this respect we they have built upon what was widespread in the pre-Islamic time. So what was happening in the era of the Prophet and his companions is the interest that is due when the debtor is no longer able to pay back in the pre-agreed time frame. And what we have is, for example, the riba al-nasi'a, for example, which is the paying back a loan with an increase. And this is not accepted in Islam. So there are different variations in this respect. And there are different types of riba, and the Prophet has forbidden any such transactions and only accepted the trading the like with the like. And for example, when we want to sell dates or to give dates, we should get back dates as such with the same nature. I mean, like for like and equal for equal, and the payment being made on the spot then. And therefore, we should not exploit each other with that increase, even if that is at the beginning of the contract. And in this respect, for example, we, according to the jurists, well, this has been forbidden. This has been forbidden by the scripture because it leads to a bigger riba, a bigger usury. So if we exploit someone because of interests at the beginning of the contract, and then even if in the contract there was a deferred payment, and when that time frame reaches maturity, the person should not be submitted to an increase in the interest, and this is the reason why this is completely forbidden. And sometimes there is, when there is a necessity, there are exceptions. The Prophet, peace be upon him, spoke about the Ariya sale, which is to pay and to exchange quantities for quantities, the like for likes and equal for equal. This has been disproved by the Prophet, peace be upon him. You cannot give one quantity and expect one quantity and a half, even if that is of the same nature. This has been forbidden, but the Prophet nevertheless has agreed to exchange dates with dates of different quality. If the person cannot find exactly the same dates to pay back his due, and that was so the Prophet has given that possibility at that time. And this is an example, which means that prohibition by the Prophet, peace be upon him, can vary. If there is an absolute sheer necessity, if the society is desperate need, and therefore we should find some kind of exceptions. And in this respect, well, there is a question that has been raised with regard to this subject. There is a difference in jurisprudence in this case. I mean, the jurists do not agree fully on the definition of riba. There is a major difference in this respect, and clearly the gap has widened in explaining what the riba that has been forbidden by a sunnah, which we call riba al-fadl, which is the quality premium in a sale transaction, for instance. And this, if anyone who follows the schools of thought, well, we find out that school of thoughts are different, and whenever a type of riba is authorized by a school of thought, well, all of a sudden it is unauthorized. It is proven illicit by a different school of thought, because the analogy is different from one school of thought to another one, and we find always exceptions based on some of the traditions of the Prophet. I'm running out of time, unfortunately, 1 minute and a half, so I need to raise an important question. We live in Europe, I live in Europe, and I know that many people do face problems with regards to riba and usury, for example, which we call riba al-fadl, which is a quality premium in a sale transaction. When we got, for example, the mortgages, for example, and also scholarships and grants to students in Europe. This could be possible because this would meet a necessary need of the people. Some people would question this, and I think it is important that we invest in higher education, and I asked, I have given a possibility, a solution, which is to literally buy part of places in schools and sell them to students, so that those students are not obliged to take credit in order to pay for their tuition in order to enroll at university. I mean, there are always ways to come around these loans from students who end up paying back high interests. And for this reason, I think it is extremely important to find means and ways to alleviate the hardship of today's people today, and students, for example, and people wanting to buy houses. I would like to, at the end of my little speech now, to speak about the difference between the interest and the usury. There has been a lot of studies in this respect, which is the difference between interest and usury, and how did we manage to distinguish between the two concepts. And I think there has been a lot of research in this respect, and I would like to say, with regard to the distinction between riba and interest, is that in Islamic economics, with regard to the interest, I think it is important for us, this is my perspective, to revisit the traditions, to revisit the scriptures in order to fine-tune our concept of the interest and our concept of usury. And therefore, it is very important not to stick to the traditional and customary definition of this, but we should look into modern situations, because but on the other hand, we need to set up a framework in order to avoid those ever-increasing interests that would cause problems to people who are indebted. And this is a reality in today's world, and therefore we definitely need to revisit the concept of interest and what is the link between interest and usury. Every usury is unacceptable, is prohibited, whereas not all interests are usury, and therefore some of the interests could be licit, and therefore we do need to revisit the legal and the Sharia ruling in order to make sure that there are no misconceptions in this respect, whether we are in Europe or elsewhere in Muslim countries. We need to look back to the jurisprudence and the case laws in order to find and fine-tune our understanding in order to look at it in more objective way. Some of the specialists I heard from my brothers who have researched a lot Islamic finance, and this person is a scholar and knowledgeable, and I spoke with him, and we tried to look at the necessity to review and revisit our conceptions and the fundamentals with regard to the idea of riba, usury, and interest in order to give it a new interpretation. Now he told me, how can we go back on the schools of thought, the customary schools of thoughts? Especially that today we're dealing with credit cards, and there is a reality. I told my friend, there is a reality, and we need to find practical solutions in order to help people out of their hardship. But we should have the inspiration from the traditions and from the scriptures, and I thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Abdullah Al Judai, for this enlightening speech. And I think that you have opened up a lot of areas for discussion at the later stage, inshallah. I would like to come directly to our next speaker, and this is Dr. Abdelazeem Abozaid. Dr. Abdelazeem Abozaid holds a master and PhD in Islamic financial law. He also holds 3 BAs in Islamic law, Arabic language, and English literature, 2 higher studies diplomas in Islamic law and human sciences. He has extensive teaching experience as a lecturer at Damascus University since 1998, then at the IIUM in Malaysia, specialized in Islamic financial law. In 2012, he became the head of the Sharia department at the Oman Arab Bank in Muscat. He has published in many international referred journals and newspapers and presented papers at many international finance conferences. His expertise in Islamic finance has been recognized by the publication of 4 authoritative books. In particular, Fiqh al-Riba was published in 2005 and is his masterwork. He's currently associate professor in the Islamic finance program at the Qatar Foundation in Doha. We had the luxury to see him quickly in the morning, and now we are very keen to hear how he comes from the theoretical part also into a review of the practical steps that has been taken throughout the last, let's say, 2-3 decades. Barakallahu feek, please.
شكرا لكم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.
May God bless and bestow peace on the noblest of all messengers, our Lord Muhammad, his family, companions and supporters, those who follow them in their righteous path until the day of judgment. I'll use the Arabic language. I think that the riba is a very important subject that cannot be studied and explained in a quarter of an hour. But in fact, we know that it is a concept that is very old in the Arab world. But in fact, it was not very different from the meaning that was attributed to it in other monotheistic religions. In the Torah, in the Old Testament, we'll find texts that forbid charging an increased amount on it. This is in fact prohibited, but in Islam the scope is wider. That is, we have the debt usually, or the riba, that is applied to the claim, and not credit, but claim or debt. And this is, of course, forbidden, as it has been mentioned so many times in all the reference literature. This is said. And in fact, we find this in the Hadith, and we find it in the Quran. Even in the explanation of the riba jahiliya, the pre-Islamic riba, this was a widespread tradition. In fact, every 2 months after lending the money or the good, an increase was charged. And we have many scholars that make these comments about the agreement on paying regularly an extra amount. And this was clearly forbidden. And then, well, this was applied also on sales. For instance, let's suppose that a certain commodity is worth 100 units, currency units, and then if one wishes to buy it by installments, not affording to pay the whole amount only once, then, well, is it possible to consider this as a riba because of the delayed payments? This is a widening of the scope of this concept, and this implies also that the charging of an extra amount is forbidden. And in fact, this is a well-known consideration, but there is also another concept, that of the need, of the necessity. And in this case, well, how can we justify or motivate this necessity? In fact, the Sharia recognizes the imperative need. In fact, there is a difference between interest and riba. And the criterion which is used in order to establish the difference is the harmful character of this practice. In fact, if this is offered according to the conditions of the market, well, this is the case of an interest which does not bring about any prejudice or damage to the debtor. And now we know that in the field of financing projects or transactions in Islam, we have relevant versicles of the Quran and Hadith. In fact, we can talk in general terms about financing. Financing and the Islamic financing is quite varied. That is, we have the profit-related financement. That is, it is based on profit, or another type of financing which does not count on obtaining an extra sum of money on it. So, in fact, this is part of the Islamic system. system of financing. And this has not been sufficiently studied. And I will try to explain a bit more the scope of this kind of practice. As we said in Islam, if the riba is forbidden, that is because of the intention of the goal. And teleologically speaking, this is forbidden. In fact, we can think of those barter type of transactions that are traditional in the old societies. Well, if we think of a type of futures contract, that is, one wishes to buy, let's say, grapes, but the grapes are still green. Now, one has to wait until they are ripe. So, when these products were developed, the criterion which was taken into consideration was that of financing in order to get some profit. But in fact, in formal terms, there are some nuances and differences here. If one wishes to buy for 1,000 euros, then the counterpart may wish to have 1,100 euros. And well, if the buyer can afford only 1,000, then there is an extra 100 which has to be settled later. So, in fact, this is a deferred payment. And in such cases, well, such a procedure cannot be tolerated, because this is the same as justifying the riba. Now, if I have a bottle of water, well, can I ask, if I want to sell it, can I ask for 1 million if the current price, which is normally practiced, is out of proportion? And is it lawful for me to buy it for a certain price and then I sell it with an increase that is at a profit? Well, in fact, in the transactions, there are many types of procedures that may be applied, but these transactions are sometimes very similar to the riba, and in some cases, these practices may turn out to be very harmful. And that is why some Islamic institutions are subject to a very severe control, because they try to take profit from all the loopholes in order to get some extra money. And sometimes there are firms that have experts and technicians that do everything in order to avail themselves of such loopholes and fill their pockets. So it is impossible to analyze all these practices and behavioral patterns. What it is important to underline is that today the Islamic banks have not sufficiently adopted and assimilated the spirit of the texts that represent religious reference and that are authoritative in this field. That is, the principle is acquired, okay, but these financial transactions transactions are not sufficiently regulated within the spirit of the Sharia. Well, we may talk globally of a financing system in the Muslim world, but here we are still far from a comprehensive project or a vision concerning the financing patterns. So in some cases, we don't take into sufficient consideration the money flows and the way money works in general. In fact, the Sharia is open, is future-looking, future-oriented, and we have to take into consideration the recent developments and ask ourselves whether or not some aspects of these practices are lawful or not. And this means also an updating of the references that we have. This has to be constantly updated because the diversification of the financial products is an ongoing process, and we cannot lag behind. Now, it is possible to issue fatwas and rulings, but well, this is only part and parcel of the system. We have to follow another path that is a more systematic, holistic approach. Otherwise, everyone may issue a fatwa, and so what? Well, this is a problem. So we need good governance. We need regulation or legislation guaranteeing the good governance or good administrative governance. And this, of course, has to obey the tenets of the main principles of the Sharia, and this could give a Islamic character to our banking and financing institutions. Otherwise, if we depend only on the fatwas, this will not be enough. And we need to have a kind of control. We have sometimes firms that may exert such, carry out such activities, but this is again piecemeal. So we need something more systematic because by way of principle, the Sharia does exist. It has to be obeyed, and otherwise, if this does not happen, one may end up in court. So, well, then if you have questions, I'll be at your disposal during the debate. Thank you very much.
Abozaid. Yeah, now we would like to see, we're definitely under time pressure, but I think that I would like to give one quick question to the panelists before we open up. And I want to start with you, Professor Vines. I will give you now the floor, but I want to ask you also with regard to what has been presented by you. I felt that the main focus of your presentation has been about the correction of excesses. We don't do that stuff here. It is an issue of code of conduct that we have to deal with. No crazy bonuses to the hooligans, as you have described them. And you have presented it away as if a reform of the financial institutions is the solution to the overall challenge. But looking into it from a wider perspective, I think that the big challenge that is facing not only the Islamic countries, but market economy in general, let's say a capitalist interest-based economy, it's about the growth. If we put growth as well, we can say that it has been made some kind of holy cow that needs to be followed, and we know that growth, if it is in an interest-based economy, is exponential. And so it is obvious that you will always come to the same challenges that we have seen in the past, mainly wars or a way how to come to a zero level again. So it would be great if you could elaborate a bit about this and could tell us how you look into the challenge that is around the system in itself. Just speak.
Is that all right? Yeah. Good. Let me respond to that big question and also respond to the very large questions which the three speakers on the panel have made, and I will be brief. All of us share the ambition to make finance more ethical. That's the core of this discussion. Let me put my issue in the most challenging way that I can in order to try and be helpful. And I'm used to doing this with my economics colleagues too. I'm a macroeconomist. I've spent most of my life doing that kind of work. And the task of a macroeconomist is to understand the way things fit together in social whole. And the central burden of the early part of my talk is that in a modern, property-owning, progressive, growing economy, savings are scarce. And when savings are scarce, there needs to be a reward for those who save, and those who use savings for investment need to pay a price. And there's no way that I know of declaring that outcome to be unjust. What this means, and furthermore, financial market integration means that however you use savings, you're going to have to pay that price. So I think what Professor Sadaf said in his very thought-provoking speech, we have to find a way of coping with problems in Europe about student loans and about mortgages, imposes an obligation on us to understand how to deal with the need to make a payment for the use of savings, to reward those that don't consume now, so as to make it possible for others to be able to borrow to fund their education or to live in their house. Now, we have to be careful to make sure that Islamic scholarship is not simply recognizing that need and finding a way to get round the prohibitions in the Quran, because that is not an activity which is helpful to the life of those who practice that activity. I think we have to start with understanding what we need and then recognize that we need to do something for it. And then we need to use our religious insights to understand how to do that in the best way possible. Let me give you an example in my own country. In the many problems of finance, which I described in my talk, I talked to you about the problems which this bad behavior imposes on many people. And policy is being constructed to try and fix that problem and that problem and that problem, which is imposed. The Archbishop of Canterbury, our religious leader in our country, has said on more than one occasion, this kind of behavior is wrong. And it's very difficult in what is now in Britain a secular society to make that statement a basis for public policy. It's particularly difficult to make religious statements about what is wrong a basis for public policy in multicultural societies in which there are many different religious insights. I think that what religious insight needs to do is to take the best practice understanding of particular things that finance does wrong and help us understand in what way they are wrong. Let me give you 4 or 5 examples. In Indian villages, no, very quick.
No, and I don't let you go away with just not answering the question of the system, because in the end, income disparity that we have today, we have the interest-based economy that we have today has reached a very strange way where we have negative interest rates now for the central banks. So what you're saying on the one hand is to follow the system, but you're not questioning. So I just want you to be also clear about this.
I will be very clear about it. I don't want to go into another Great Depression, and I'm a supporter of central bank policy at the moment in not having forced the world into the 1930s. We should be glad that they've done that. And that's required very low interest rates, and it's created very big difficulties for those who live on pensions. Without that policy, we would be sunk. Let me describe to you other difficulties that moral insights give. In Indian villages, microcredit is important because credit by rich people is usurious. It's possible for all of us to agree on that use of that word. It's just wrong. Let me talk about pensions in which people in my country would not subscribe to pensions unless they are compelled to do so, because people make mistakes and have holidays rather than worrying about what will happen, and pay for travelling to wherever rather than worrying about what they would have in their 70s. That's an issue of public policy. It is wrong that fund managers take money and buy yachts with our savings because they are able to rip us off. And many pieces of analysis help us do that. But it's important to understand at the core that the financial system needs to reward those who save and needs to involve people paying for use of savings. And if that creates difficulty in the discussion of riba and in Islamic finance, then it's necessary for Islamic finance to make the kind and have the kind of important discussions that you described in your talk.
Anyhow, just for your information, riba connected to zakah has this element, because you have the necessity to pay 2.5% on your wealth as zakah. So you have the negative encouragement to get the money back into the circle. Okay, but coming to Professor Abdullah Al Judai, and also elaborating on what just has been said, we have now a deposit facility of minus 0.2. That means minus 0.2, which is the interest rate between the European Central Bank and national banks. So we as Muslims, we say, well, we want a zero interest rate. Now we have even a minus interest rate. So is Europe going to be now the model for us?
يعني أنا أقول أنه هذه القضية ليست يعني لا تؤخذ بسطحيتها لا ريب في الآخر إذا كان.
This question should not be dealt with superficially. So when we need to distinguish between interest and riba or usury, well, it is at the end of the day extremely important to distinguish, because this distinction is made in the Western capitalism, and these are, I mean, people from the churches who have scholars in churches who are the ones who determine the distinction between these two concepts, and they are jurists indeed, and they tried to find an answer to this dilemma, and people have accepted this kind of distinction and agreed to have some kind of a fair interest, and they have integrated some kind of concept of what interest is and what usury is. So it has been made acceptable, morally acceptable for banks to take some kind of interest or usury, and it has been said later that banks are allowed to take some kind of interest just to enable them to cover their costs, whereas in our religion, interest is forbidden unless there is a major necessity. And when there is a necessity, well, Islam enables such transactions, for example, for mortgages, and this is basically what I wanted to say with regard to Islam.
You're in Paris, so you are very much also within the challenge of the Muslim minority quests for finance. So how would you deal with this challenge?
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اسمح لي في البداية قبل أن
In the name of God, gracious and compassionate and merciful. Well, in fact, we're talking about macroeconomics, Professor Vine. I think that in the Islamic, I'm talking about the Keynesian and neoclassical pattern based on investment, but this is not what makes the content of the Islamic finance. We are talking about capitalization and saving. Now, in order to answer your question, when I prepared my PhD, I focused on the following question: why isn't there any Islamic bank in France? Actually, in the Société Générale, which is a French bank, there is a department that shows some interest in the Sharia type of financing, and we have some examples of Tunisian banks that have some branches or in France. But this is a very important and topical question for the Muslim communities, and many studies and some research work has been done so far in order to underscore the importance of an Islamic bank in France. For instance, this might have a twofold advantage. The French economists consider that this could channel the capitals coming from the Gulf countries towards France for investment, and then this would also help the great Muslim community living in France.
Dr. Abdelazeem, some people say that today the economic challenges are so complex that if you describe it, especially with regard to riba and what has been presented by you, to see that today, for example, the European Central Bank now has decided to put within the coming 12 to 18 months 1.1 trillion euro into the market. So money is no longer between two persons, that the one is giving, the other one is taking. What we see today is that the money that is given out is plainly from states to encourage economic growth in the countries they are living in. So is it not a completely different quest or a different paradigm that is in front of us?
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بداية اسمح لي أن أدلي بتعليق بسيط على قضية أثارت اهتمامي ذكرها الأستاذ الدكتور يوسف الجديع.
Well, there was something which has drawn my attention in the intervention of Dr. Judai. The futures contract, that is when you buy, you sell, for instance, a quantity of fruit before they are ripe. Well, actually, this was quite a novelty if it was seen in connection with the riba. But in fact, the transaction has to be a kind of a barter, that is, or then you have to deal with the same product, that is, in a futures contract of this type. Let's say the dates have to be on the branch of the tree, and without falling, you cannot then collect it from the floor. So this is an important clause. And then this is based on forecasts. That is, I can assess and predict what possible necessities might look like in the future. But in fact, now we're talking about usually on sales. So this is a different paradigm, because if we talk about the futures, we are not sure whether this will come true or not. So, whereas a sale is a real act, so that is why we focus on the sales riba, as usual. Thank you very much, Dr. Abdelazeem. In fact, you have explained it quite clearly. And in fact, when the Prophet was asked about this type of transaction, well, he did not support it anyway, because this actually is based on a kind of predictability. But in fact, you don't know what the quantity of that fruit will be, the one that might have been picked up afterwards. So this is the same which applies to wheat, cereals, dried grapes, and some other commodities. In fact, this is something that is not of a vital importance for the survival of a family, for instance.
Like to give some? Okay. All right. Then I want to open up. We have now, I think, about half an hour. Do we have half an hour? In total? 20 minutes? Okay, 20 minutes. And if you're really interested, maybe we can make it 30. Okay, we start in the very rear. The sister, the lady over there. Do we have some microphones? Yeah, just upstairs. At the very end. Okay. Okay.
Hello. Assalamu alaikum. I just have two questions regarding the role of Islamic finance could it influence the European directive concerning the regulatory framework with all the ethic values that it includes? It is included in Islamic finance, and could we think that by applying, the interest market rate tax advantages to retail banking, we could find a balance. We could find a balance at the end and apply interest in compliance with Islamic finance principles.
Okay, thank you. Next, yeah, there. تفضل.
مساء جميل. سوف أبدأ بملتمس أتمنى أن يقبل.
I have a little request here, and I would like to have a couple of questions to raise. I have some comments as well with regard to the presentations that have been presented from Mohammed Seddik. Basically, I did not understand why you commended the what we call the economy of convention. And same things you spoke about the Islamic economy, and you refused that we should compare between Islamic economy and the communist or capitalist system. It's true that the liberal capital system evolves, but it evolves once they face crises. So it is important to take lessons from the last economic crunch of 2008 that we witnessed with regard to the Stalin and Marxist systems. They have been proven wrong. It is true, but part of their conventions is still valid. And why is it today that the Islamic banking are being inspired from the capital systems, capital banks? Are they not able to set up their own bank with their own systems? And I myself, I'm against any creativity in all different systems. I mean, we should be able to build on existing systems and add to them some value. With Islamic finance, it's true, when they came to life, when they have been incepted, they were completely new, without any background experience, and therefore I think it is important to draw from prevailing economic systems. And if I may take one more minute, if it's possible.
We have a lot of people who have raised up the hand, so thank you very much for your intervention. Okay, the man in green, yes, in green. ورا تفضل ورا please.
Salam alaikum. Bismillah. Donc, je m'adresse en français.
I'll speak French. I would like to go back to an essential point here. You underlined the added value for a basic price for riba. Don't you think that you should underline the intermediary, which is today the bank, certainly when it is being assisted by the politicians, which actually is something that shows that there is an unhealthy alliance between finance and politics?
Here in the front. The lady, yes, if you stand up. Okay.
Thank you all for the insightful speeches. So there is always a space between idealism and reality. When it comes to strategic management or to financial management, there is always this contradiction. if you want to make the balance, or if you want to do some little bit work or investigation in this area, how to bring them all in a common area, idealism and reality, which is ethics and implementation, the implementation of ethics. What can be done, or what are the elements, the important elements to put in mind? Thank you.
Okay, we take 3 more, and then please here.
السلام عليكم. أبدأ مداخلتي أو سؤالي ببيت شعري.
I would like to say at the beginning that it is important for all of us to agree on the situation of the financial systems and the Islamic system as well. This Islamic finance cannot be successful unless it keeps to its fundamental ethical framework in order to make headway. So we have to take lessons from reality when we talk about Islamic finance in Europe or in the Gulf states. Don't you think that there is indeed an added value which makes these banks stand out compared to other banks? And what is the rationale behind these Islamic banks in the Arab world?
In the midst, the front, and we take one from there.
Assalamu alaikum. On vous remercie d'avoir dénoncé
Well, thank you for having denounced this masquerading and the capitalist system. But I would have thought you'd been a bit more severe in denouncing this capitalist system that for centuries produced things such as slavery, the situation that we know in Latin America, had such a negative impact in Asia. Could you actually support those who plead for being more sober? I mean, Professor Ramadan said, no compromise. Let's go back to the general interest. Let's go back to the essential. We are being faced with wild capital here.
Okay, thank you. Okay, last one in this round here.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Do you prefer to talk in Arabic or English?
It's up to you. We have
Okay, I will go in English, whatever. Thank you very much for presentation. Personally, I would like to talk personally with each of you to talk about different things. This concept, all the things that you already put it on, maybe we are agree with it, maybe we're different, but this is not the case right now. I would like to talk, to ask only one question. What concerning the crisis, I'm not going to call it the word crisis with admitting it's happened to 2007. Maybe you can give me a definition. It's a world crisis, of a US crisis, or European crisis, or Arabic crisis, whatever. But this crisis, during the crisis, most of the people, they said, we have an Islamic alternative. As we know from Islamic economy, that's balance on social justice. So this is the major point of Islamic economy. I'm one who already wrote a PhD on Islamic economy. I already put it in a case that there is an Islamic alternative in the crisis of capitalism. I would like to know what have been done till now concerning Islamic economy to be an alternative for the social justice in the world. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, I will give the floor now to the panelists to respond. We will start with Dr. Mohammed Seddik.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
Now, with regard to the lady who has raised a question between the relationship between the capital economy, communist economy, and Islamic economy, and well, to be truthful, when the concept of Islamic economy came out, and when we started researching this concept, indeed, at some point, communist banking was widespread in the Arab world, and Islamic banking was looked at as being the alternative in order to make prevail justice. And this is basically what has been done by communist banking as well, because the ultimate motivation behind communist-based financing was to create some kind of equality between in the society. And some of the people thought that Islamic banking is similar to communist banking, which is not true, at all, because freedom, individual freedom is something sacred in Islamic values, and therefore we cannot believe in what communists say about the collective ownership, which is in contradiction with the innate need of independence, of the individual independence. And when I say that the communist or socialist system that was in place by the Soviet Union, which is the central planning and the grip of the central government, this is not in line with Islamic concepts and philosophy. This system has been let aside and overshadowed by the socialists themselves, and they resorted to the liberal system, whereas Islamic system is closer to the capitalist system. Now, with regard to the values and to what extent these values are comparable. When I speak about the economy of the conventions, this school of thought in France, well, they are close to the Islamic economy. The idea is to boost the economy, the real economy, and therefore this is in line with the Islamic concepts when we talk about justice and freedom. But the added value of Islam here is the ethical dimension and the code of conduct that is imposed by Islam. So there is a slight difference on this respect.
Thank you. Please, Dr. Abdelazeem.
I would like to answer to some of the questions that have been raised with regard to the linkage between idealism and reality and what we can do and what did the Islamic finance do. I think these are two connected questions. Now, what can we do in order to find a linkage between the ideal world and reality today when we talk about Islamic finance as it should be and not as it is today in practice? Well, many things. We need many things. The first thing we need to enact laws based on Islam so that we should not leave room for what you would call some kind of independent views or independent legal reasoning. We should enact laws so that we don't allow for something to be licit in one bank and illicit in another bank, or forbidden and acceptable. So, and therefore the clients become completely puzzled and they don't know what is right and wrong. Now, with regard to the good governance, I think it is important that it should be based on references, on Islamic references and Islamic rulings, because these Islamic finances meet challenges, external challenges that are imposed by the central banks or the governments. And if we want to meet these challenges, well, we need some kind of an institutional approach and not individual initiatives. as it's happening now. With regard to the added value that Islamic banks have brought up until today, well, Islamic banks or financing have managed to provide money and credits for consumer goods, for production. That has been a big success, and this is a major thing. So it is important that tradesmen be able to take grants from banks in order to boost his production, his economy, and this is very important. So in principle, this is accepted, but we need to meet some legal rulings, some to make sure that this is not some kind of a disguised riba. Now, with regard to the equity-based financing, well, Islamic finances have failed so far because it couldn't deal with the micro loans and micro credits, and up until today, Islamic finances have failed. But now they managed to finance production credits, and this is extremely important so far, especially with regard to the debt-based financing, which has been important compared to equity-based financing. Now, the fact that there are no Islamic banks in some Arab countries, well, there are political reasons for that. Some governments, some Arab countries are afraid of anything linked to Islam or connected to Islam. For them, Islamic banking, according to some governments, they look at it as they are afraid that these banks would sponsor terrorism and would create some kind of a renaissance, an Islamic renaissance in some societies, and this is something they fear.
شكرا جزاك الله خير. أنا تعليق يسير أذكره في سياق
I would like to be brief and comment on the last question. What is the added value that Islamic financing are providing or the Islamic economy? I think there is, according to me, this is my own understanding, there is a problem in finding out the basic rulings and Sharia rulings of Islam, in interpreting them, because the economy is human-based. We shouldn't mingle with Islam. We should look at the foundations and the bases and foundations, but the economy is run at our level, a level of man. And these teachings and Islamic fiqh is there to protect the consumers, and it shouldn't be because the basic principles in Islam is that economy, everything in economy is licit, is acceptable, because we encourage economy, we encourage investment and initiatives. But we set a framework, and this is what has been said by some of our colleagues. Some said that Islamic banking are accused today in some countries in terms of their intentions. No, there are some kind of what we call ijtihad, which is the independent legal reasoning that needs to help us understand the financial system today, and therefore what is important for us today is that Islamic banking and Islamic economy so far has not enough to offer in order to help us get out of this crisis. Our initiatives are limited, and therefore we shouldn't be so hard in judging the Islamic banking. The intention is good. The intentions are good. Well, there are mistakes that have been made, but it is going to evolve and develop so that we serve the interests of the citizens. So what is licit and illicit should be clearly stated, and we should interpret it in light of today's development. governments. Because the world today, the world is run by legislations. There is a legal framework in the capitalist system where there are laws, and these laws basically enshrine the right of the people, the customers, and the investors. So what we need basically in the Islamic world and Islamic finance is to create this very system which make the framework clear what is legal, illegal, licit, illicit, etc. And we shouldn't uphold riba for the sake of it, or make it forbidden for the sake of it. There should be a rationale behind it, and the rationale is that ethics should be based, and we should be fair in interpreting the basics of Islam and the Islamic teachings. So indeed, today's economic system lacks ethics. It lacks the code of conduct. I mean, we see that people are deceitful and they try not to be fair as an intention. So, so this is what we should look at it clearly. Well, thank you.
Professor Vines, if we can come back to you, one of the questions has been more about the system again. I think I come from a macroeconomic background as well. So if we look for constitutive elements to describe an economy, then a private ownership is one of them. The other one is whether it is market-driven or state-driven. And there is no doubt that Islam is clear in favor of private ownership, and at the same time also of a market economy. But maybe it is more a social market economy that it stands for. Coming back to the issue of interest, that is the key of the challenge. Is the dilemma that we face today embedded in the paradigm of this capitalist interest-based approach? That means as long as I'm based on growth and I need to grow, and the environment in the end is not able to grow endless, we are in a consistent dilemma that we can't get out of, and that has caused all the issues that have been brought to our attention by the question about slavery and whatever.
There are many questions to deal with. The environment is a huge question. Let's put that conversation to one side because we need to. I think of the 1930s when Keynes faced the disintegration of Western Europe and the possibility of a complete collapse of the economic system as he knew it. And his task was as a reformer of that system and proposed a framework which has done wonders for the last 50 years. I think we face something as large a choice. I talked about individual, in my talk and many of the others, about behavior at the individual bank level of duplicity, cheating, fraud, theft. But as you rightly say, there's a macroeconomic aspect as well, which has given rise to this enormous sense of injustice. The description of what happened in all around Europe, as well as in North America, was of spectacular dishonest risk-taking, followed by taxpayers paying to bail out the people and the institutions that had carried out this behavior. And 6 years later, we don't see anything like enough reform. We now face what's both a management challenge, very difficult, involves zero interest rates to keep growing, difficult for all sorts of ways, a management challenge, but also an ethical and moral challenge in not having a financial system which guarantees that we do this all again in 2023. And so it's a double. There's a lot of work for technocrats in making the European monetary system, the Eurozone work in a way it's not. In macroeconomic management in emerging market economies who face very real dangers in the next year. that's technocratic management problems, but there are huge issues of the underlying structure of finance which we need to deal with and to reform.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Vines. I have been just rewarded by 3 more questions, so I can take 3 more interventions from your side. Maybe we take the lady there and the young man here in the front, and somebody else from this side. Okay, so you. Okay, please keep it very brief because he understood 3 minutes. So, sorry, we said this, yeah. Take the young man here, okay.
Assalamu alaikum. Bonjour. Oui, en fait, c'est une question concernant
Yes, I have a question on mortgage for people living here in Europe. I'm a blue collar living in Europe for 15 years. We have 3 kids. My wife started working recently. We live in a 2-room flat. The building has been sold, and we are being faced with an increase in our rent of 50%. We refused. So, well, we don't really have a good relationship with our owner. After 3 years, we have to leave the flat.
Okay, I think it's clear. We got an answer to this one from Sheikh Abdullah Al Judai before. So, thank you, because it is a very personal and clear question.
Deux questions, s'il vous plaît.
Okay.
Yes, but I have 2 questions. In my religion, is it authorized to actually make a loan?
Because it has been part of the presentation before. Thank you. Could you please give to the lady in the rear?
Thank you. I had a question, because in all your remarks, we actually take the current economic situation and the interest rate-driven economy as a given. And we try to do many things, and yeah, as the speaker mentioned, he said Islamic banking. We try to fit our Islamic rules and Sharia, which are there for many centuries. We try to fit them in the current or the dominant and leading economic system. So my question is, why do we take that as given, and don't we have another option simply because we as the Islamic nations are simply not dominant enough?
Okay, thank you. Last one was here.
Alors, je pense que vous avez dû déjà répondre à la question.
I think you've answered this question already, but this concerns the definition of necessity according to Sharia. So the case where you can actually make a loan with interest. You said that if you are in dire straits, you can do that. What are the prerequisites for that? Can you actually give us a few examples?
Okay, Sheikh Abdullah, I think we start with you, just some clarification about the loan issue, very shortly. ماشي؟ يعني في موضوع سؤالين في موضوع ربا الأخ والأخت نفس الشيء. يعني أنا أي مفهوم الضرورة.
جزاك الله خير. طيب ليبدأ من الآخر. مفهوم الضرورة
I'll start with the necessity. There is room for discussion, and in fact, in my research, I referred to necessity and individual necessity. Don't think that necessity may be so compelling to the degree that one may face a deadly risk, for instance, or risk everything in life. In fact, there is a number of definitions and explanations. I tried to give my own reading of these concepts of imperative and individual need in borrowing and lending. This is what I mentioned at the beginning of my intervention. We have the quality premium, which may meet the need, but then there is also what we call riba nasi'a. That is a contract which is based on a partial condition, which is a clause that is only provisional.
الحقيقة الفقه الإسلامي فيما يتعلق بالربا
As concerns the riba, usually we have akhbar or accounts about Omar bin al-Khattab, the second well-guided caliph, who said that the Prophet Muhammad had talked about certain cases, limited cases of riba. In fact, we did not have in those times all the details and categories. For instance, transactions buying and selling gold, buy gold, or currency exchange, and so on. In fact, now we are talking about a whole financial system, and now we are trying to go back. In fact, in the old texts, we have, for instance, cases where the premium riba, the premium was to a certain extent tolerated. But if I buy for 100 and then I sell for 120, well, that's something else. This may be forbidden. But now, just think of the currency exchange. We have a commodity market or financial market, currency market. Well, this has grown into important markets. But in fact, it was because of the derivatives that we had to face the financial crisis that we know. But in fact, what is forbidden is exactly the type of riba that may result in such circumstances. Well, this is what was really forbidden. If, for instance, I buy for a price and then I make the same calculation in another currency, in euro, for instance, well, this may give a margin and influence the price, but then the transactions on currencies may give rise to speculation, and this is really tremendously harmful. And well, we have witnessed such scandals in Indonesia, for instance, and this influenced also the commodity exchanges. And this crisis has been more serious than others in the past. And so, well, this is very important. We may consider this as a basic principle or a tenet in the Sharia. But for the others, well, the situation is not very final and very clear.
Audience, I want to give a very special thank also to CILE, to the Center for Islamic Legislation and Ethics. I think it is obvious that this session has shown us the necessity to put much more emphasis and deep thinking into the challenges in the area of economic and finance. And there is no doubt that this session today had only the possibility to give glimpses and limited insights into a very, very wide area. And I'm sure that this will be not the last intervention from the Center of Islamic Legislation and Ethics on this very, very important area. We have started this morning with about an hour delay, and we are able to close down with only 15 minutes delay. So we have been able to spare 45 minutes during the day because of the discipline of the panelists and also of the audience. I would like to thank you all for your patience. I want to thank you all for your interest, and I hope, inshallah Rabbil Alameen, that we will be all together tomorrow again. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ustad Ibrahim didn't leave anything for me, so thank you very much and see you tomorrow. Jazakallah.